task force and also the audience is we want to use Dr. Commodore's time. He's the focus here. We will break briefly for lunch sometime between 12 and 12:15. Bring our lunches back to the table, and Dr. Commodore will continue on at that point in time. He would like to go until roughly about 3 o'clock. I would ask if the task force can go until 3:30 so we can address a couple of administrative pieces and have some public comment time with that. If folks are comfortable, that's going to be sort of the plan. So we're adjusting the agenda a little bit. Most of it will be, again, trying to give Dr. Commodore Bill as much time as possible to go through this process. Does that make sense with folks? Comfortable with that? Folks in the audience will still stay with the cards, but cards will be as much as anything to tell me that you've got a question. And then I'll have you, I am trainable, so I can, the cards are maybe not the best, easiest way to do it. If you've got something, I may just point at you and have you stay. But if you can at least summarize sort of what's on here. The cards that came up, I'm going to summarize it in the aspect that they seem to be additional variables to fit with the question. One is looking at, does your model take into consideration that an intact does your model take into consideration that an intact family has one house, a divorced family needs 2 homes, both parents need to have a place for the child to live, both have housing expenses, et cetera, so it's adding in the housing expense. Other variables to add in, how about the many families without good or easy options? They're vastly different with availability and quality and cost. Some of these things include housing, transportation, food we've talked about, childcare, education, clothing, et cetera, so additional variables to add in on that. Yeah, and this also brings in the aspect of looking at, I'll put this in sort of the grocery or food category, using a gas station to get candy bars and not fresh produce, so there's a quality aspect in this, and then identifying, going back to Kathleen's piece of all needs and wants are not equal. How do we define and break some of those pieces out? So those are the pieces, if I summarize those correctly, that were being raised in the audience, and I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Well, I'm having a good time. I hope you guys are as well. These are really interesting and difficult questions, and I hope we can explore them. And I really like the comments from the task force. Thank you very much. I understand there's an issue about what I said on my first bullet point there. So I'm going to table it. Isn't that what you do when there's an issue? So let's table it and move on to the next one. Right? And we emphasize that monetary costs and economic costs are not the same. Right? Because there's what I tell my students, there's an opportunity cost of most things. Right? And that opportunity costs are real economic costs, even if they're not monetary costs. And that's really what Pamela was talking about. That even if there's no monetary cost for moving from one set of market to another, there's opportunity cost because of quality or whatever issues, right? That is the way I interpret what you said, and she's exactly right. So full costs include 2 things, 2 components. And indeed, that was in my slides. That monetary costs and opportunity costs. Opportunity costs, I tell my students, is the fact that when you take an action, there's an opportunity foregone. That you can't take some other action. And that when you have a child, you can't go to the fancy supermarket or the better supermarket, or whatever the right word is. And so you have to go to the lower supermarket, and that the opportunity cost is the opportunity for going to a better place. Right? That is a true cost, and I don't mean to diminish it. I really don't. But that's opportunity costs, and opportunity costs can exist, as my slide says, even in the absence of expenditures, even in the absence of monetary costs. Right? So I fully acknowledge that. Now, let's think about opportunity costs, because that's where it lies. That really is where it lies. The most important opportunity cost is clearly the time spent by the parents in raising their children. And we and everybody else ignore that cost. We ignore it. Not because it's unimportant, but because we have no idea how to deal with it. Right? No idea. Even economists don't have any idea. Because parents are so different. Look at my next to last point there. For some people, having kids just takes you away from what you want to do. You all know people like that, right? On the other hand, having kids is so welfare enhancing, I'd rather not do anything else, right? You all know people like that too, right? I can tell you, my son just moved out of the house. It was awful. And nothing pleased me more than raising him, right? It was one of the great joys of my life. Time to break down. But not everybody is one way or the other way. And the issue is how to include that cost, that opportunity cost, for some people, but not for others. Because there really is an opportunity cost of not having your regular leisure time activities because you deal with it with your raising your child. For some people, but not others. And we don't know how to deal with that. So I want to acknowledge that is probably the most important opportunity cost around, but we ignore it because we have no idea, no way to distinguish between them. And if the task force has a way to deal with that on a policy basis, that'd be great, but there's no economics that I could offer here. None. However, there is a second opportunity cost, and we should deal with it. And that is where you guys have to be involved. And the way to deal with the second one. Next one. Elizabeth here.
I know something's happening
Elizabeth.
here. I'm sorry.
I'm just joking. We'll wait. No, that's the next one. Next one after that. That one. That's it.
There we go. Sorry, folks.
I want to spend a lot of time on this second opportunity cost because this is really the same opportunity cost as Pamela dealt with. This slide is Pamela's slide. Because Pamela dealt with it with regard to markets, and I dealt with it in terms of housing. But it's the same conceptual issue. Let me do a hypothetical, which is incorrect. The hypothetical issue, as I have there, right? The same two-bedroom apartment, the same rent, the same utilities, with or without a child. Right? You can imagine that situation, right? Maybe you've been there. Maybe many people have been there, right? So, what can we say? There's no monetary cost because your rents and everything is the same. In my data, you get zero cost. true. Because there's no money. It measures household expenditures, and you do not get additional household expenditures. And so that's the way the Census Bureau does it. But you are right. You're right to say that there is an opportunity cost. What is the opportunity cost of switching the den to a nursery? That turns out to be the critical issue. That is the devil in the detail. Right? There is no doubt that the loss of a den is an opportunity cost. You know, it's nicer to have the den than not to have the den. We can accept that. Right? And so, in this hypothetical situation, just to keep the discussion focused, we have a case which is not realistic, but is hypothetically interesting, where there are no monetary costs, but there is a clearly identifiable opportunity cost. No monetary cost, but there isn't a, and that really is your case, right?
If I,
Sure.
This is Pamela. This is something that I have the most difficulty with, and maybe you can help me with this, is that when people have a den and they change it into a nursery, there's actually a great deal of cost that goes into that. Wallpapering, removing everything, moving out the file drawers. The child's not going to sleep in the file drawer, so you need to get a crib, a rocker, a bassinet. You need all of these things that, in fact, are not just the opportunity costs, but are the monetary costs that are added in here. So they're not equal.
You're right. You're right, because we have to include the bassinet. And I know about that since my daughter says, "Dad, you're paying for this, right?" So I pay for all of this stuff, Carla. So I'm a new granddad, which makes me happy. But that comes that in the census data. That is in child care and education. So those numbers show up. They just don't show up in housing costs. But they also, but the wallpaper, that is a housing expense. So what you're saying is my hypothetical is not correct, and you're right. But you're right, and it doesn't show up my data. My data, you'll see. But try to get your head around the idea, assuming they don't exist. Just assume it. You know, economists just assume things, just so we can focus our attention on particular issues. Right? So I want you to assume incorrectly that there's no additional housing costs with the ones you mentioned, which are correct. But rather, there are opportunities. The only cost here is the loss of the den, just to keep your focus on. Right? And the issue then is, how do we measure these opportunity costs, because they don't show up in the census data? They don't. We don't. The census doesn't tell us what they are. They don't tell the USDA, they don't tell Dr. Venor, and they don't tell me. Right? They don't tell us. And the real distinction between the three models is how we measure these opportunity costs. Remember, someone asked, we have these three models? And I said that we'll get to how they're different. Fundamentally, profoundly, they're different because they measure opportunity costs differently. That is the profound difference between the three models. And my goal, as much time as you'll give me, is to tell you how we all measure opportunity costs differently. Does that make sense? And you remember the Minnesota statement of about reviews that the Minnesota report statement that all these costs don't measure cost directly, they indirectly, right? Why do existing models measure costs indirectly? Because they're designed to deal with these opportunity costs. You get that? It's really important that you get that. It's really important. So, the question is, how do we measure these opportunity costs, and what do we do about it? And my answer is, we don't do a very good job at it. All right? Let's go to the next slide. First, I found this on the web. Some journalist, which was reporting on a USDA report back in 2010, said, I think probably what Laurie was saying, that's a quote from the journalist, that there's no monetary costs, right? I like that quote because it is truth. There's a lot of people like that. There's a lot of people that spend more money on housing too, but there's a lot of people like that too. You know. And so she said what she said, and I don't need to repeat it for you, right? And there's a quote from who said it, and it was on some website that was reporting on a USDA recent study. So my hypothetical isn't so wrong. It's not all the time. I don't want to say it's accurate, but it's sometimes accurate. Is that can you buy that, Pamela? Sometimes.
It still is tough with me because I'm too aware of the additional costs that are the housing costs.
Of course you're right, and we'll get to the numbers. I'll show you the numbers, okay? Okay, let's go to the next one. All right. So, as I said before, the two other models, besides my own, is how to evaluate the opportunity costs. And the two models are the USDA model and the income equivalence models. The Rothbard and Engels are just variations on the income equivalence models. Both are fundamentally designed to include the opportunity costs of the den. The nursery den example is the single best example to deal with models of child costs, I think. Because both are designed to estimate these imputed costs, right? Up to what, instead of opportunity costs are not monetary costs, they're imputed costs, right? So they're designed to measure these opportunity costs. And we impute them. Now, the interesting thing about the USDA model is they changed their mind a few years back. Right? Before 2009, they just took housing costs and divided it by the members of the household. So a child would have, so that in the hypothetical, a third of the expenditures would have gone to the child, right? Even though there were no monetary addition. Right? So that was an imputed cost, wasn't it? That was an imputed cost above and beyond the monetary costs. You all get that? You all understand? It's really important you get that. Dividing the monetary cost by 3, as the USDA did pre-2009, was just an imputed cost. It wasn't an actual cost. You really have to get that. Now, since 2009, they said, a fellow took a half step in the right direction, in my judgment. You know, the guy at USDA is just another economist. It's a fellow by the name of Mark Leno, and he's done this forever. And I've talked with him on the phone, though I've never met him. But he's a good economist. I don't want to talk him down, that he makes certain decisions. And he said that since 2009, we deal with additional costs in a special way. So that if there's no monetary costs, we'd impute the cost of moving from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom apartment. Right? The household wouldn't actually buy a 3-bedroom apartment. We'd find out, we'd get some surveys, we'd find out how much it costs to rent a 3-bedroom apartment, and the difference between a 3-bedroom and a 2-bedroom, we'd impute to the child. Huh? And Lino said, well, when you have a child, you need an extra bedroom. That sounds right, especially if you're rich. It may not be true if you're not, right? Right? May not be true. It may not be true if you're not. But it's true if you're rich. So Lino made a decision about how we should impute these costs, right? That was his decision, and he changed it, like that, right? Just like that. Right? So the USDA imputes children's housing costs as the hypothetical additional rental charge associated with moving from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom apartment, or a 2-bedroom to a 4-bedroom apartment. There's 2 children. Huh? Don't every kids ever use the same bedroom? Not if you're rich. Right? These are imputed costs, not actual costs. Let's go to the next one.
Dr. Conrad?
Yeah.
Isn't the same way of saying that additional cost, though, and the imputed cost is what the measure is for the opportunity cost?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. His imputed cost is a way of measuring opportunity cost. Exactly right. I'm really glad you said that. Yeah, exactly right. All right. Now, they probably did an unfair thing. I went back to a California report, which was voluminous, and I sent Elizabeth a copy. You have a copy of the entire report if anybody needs it. And the California report, of course, emphasizes income equivalence methods. And so they made some nasty comments about the USDA report. That's what you'd expect, right? And that's what they said. The USDA, you see the quote. They say the USDA report, this is from the California report, they say the USDA report approach is direct, but it relies on assumptions that are designed to be wrong. And I've got it here if you guys want to see it. Now, what are the assumptions? That people buy a third bedroom, an extra bedroom for a child. It's designed to be broad. You know that doesn't happen. You know it. It may happen in some cases, but he has no evidence that that happens generally. This was just his own assumption. He picked that out of his own head. Right? Let me tell you, I'm an economist. I do that too. So I don't want to tell you that I'm better than anybody else. But I didn't do it here. What
Lisa has a question.
Oh, Lisa, sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, Lisa. Go ahead.
Well, and maybe I'm saying the same thing Pamela just said, and I understand your point about not everybody goes and buys a new apartment or a new house or whatever when they have a child. But if you're trying to measure the loss of the den, in your example, if you go from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, that gives you the den plus the nursery.
Yes.
Doesn't that
Yes.
figure out what the opportunity cost is then?
Only if you're willing to make the payment. Yes, that's true. If people are actually willing to buy a third bedroom in order to keep the den. But some people say, I've got a child, I don't need a den. That's true, I'm sure it's true of some. But is it true of everyone? It is his effort. And, you know, there's some logic to it, and that's what you're saying, and you're right. But he doesn't know that that's what many people do, that most people do. He doesn't know, and neither do I. And unfortunately, neither do you guys. But this is what he does. This is what he does. And the reason why I think it's humorous to say that the California report just criticized it is because you all know who the director of the California report was, right? Dr. Venora. And so please ask her about that next month. She was the director of this California report. All right, of the project which ran that. So I would dispute this measurement. And I'll show you some numbers about how much that matters. In fact, let's go to the next slide. Look at his numbers as compared with my numbers in a very special case. My numbers were 2006 to 2009, and his numbers are just 2009, and my numbers ignore the opportunity cost. Ignore it, I grant you. My numbers are just the monetary costs, and so my numbers are wrong, right? And this is his numbers. His numbers are 3.5 times mine. 3.5 times mine for the same income level. This is for a married household with one child, where the average for low income, which the average income is $36,000. And he gets, the child's housing costs alone are 10% of their income. Huh? And I get something like $1,000. An enormous difference. Yeah.
So I want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. What we talked about was that monetary cost plus opportunity cost is equal to the economic cost, correct?
Correct.
And the U.S. Census information will measure the monetary cost, but there's some non-monetary opportunity costs that are not measured in that.
Correct.
And what I just heard you say is the $1,014 per year is the monies from the USDA.
No, it's the Census Bureau money.
I'm sorry, you're right, I apologize. The Census Bureau dollars
Ignoring.
ignoring an opportunity cost where there's been no monetary expenditure.
Yes, I ignore it, and that's wrong. And he includes it with some basis of his own, and he gets 3.5 times my number.
So,
We're both wrong. The issue is, who's more wrong?
well, there you go.
I
I
thought you were
am
trying
not-
to decide who was right. I'm really confused.
In our game, no one is wrong,
Good
because
to
the
know.
world is so complicated that we do our best to deal with this issue. And I'm going to tell you a little later why I think the best thing to do is ignore it. But I'm not ignoring it conceptually, I'm ignoring it practically. And he's going to tell you, if you had him here, why this is the right approach. And you can read his reports, right? Tara read all his reports, right?
Some reports.
All right, well, whatever. And, you can read his reports and what he says. And they're available on the web, and Elizabeth has them, so you can read them. So, but what is striking is that the opportunity costs are so much larger than the monetary costs. So he is saying that the value of the den is 3.5 times, the den plus the housing unit is 3.5 times the value of the housing unit. Right? Let's make sure we get that. It's not the concept, it's the numbers. The USDA numbers say the value of the den is worth more than the housing units altogether. Right? right? Because the den is worth $2,500 approximately, right? And if it's true that 1,000 is the real housing cost, in terms of, of the incremental housing cost, and then when you add the den, you get more than that, more than double. You have to ask yourselves whether that's reasonable. Even though it's true, I'm wrong too, because I ignore it. If you look at the title of my paper, that we talk about the monetary costs, right? Maybe you didn't notice that. And what that really means is I ignored the opportunity costs. And we do say that. I mean,